Atty, what's your one-word summary?
Wow, yeah, that's good. That's a great one. That's a great one. For me, it has to be whiteness.
Whoa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Woo! Whoa! Put it out there. All right, Daryl, go ahead with the next set of questions. Woo!
Well, no, we can't stop there, Ernie. Professor Quarles, you got to go into explaining that one. The whiteness. Why whiteness? What do you mean by that?
That's a really good
All right,
one.
thank you. I think the full-scale marketing and absorption in the possessive investment of whiteness, and that's actually the title for a book that George Lipsitz penned a few years ago. Whiteness literally dominated the airwaves in one form or another, from immigration to education to voting rights, individual rights. And white supremacy has really kind of shape-shifted its way into the hearts and minds of mainstream America. I mean, racism is embraced more readily as a matter of interest as well as attitudes, are really a problem of property as well as pigment. Racial identity and property are, as we know, are deeply interrelated concepts. But whiteness, from really our founding as a nation, has always enjoyed kind of a historical preeminence and protections in American law. But now, however, with billionaire-funded programs, policies, and initiatives like Project 2025 and stakeholders like South African, Elon Musk, we're in the midst of a third reconstruction in America, one that will require unique forms of resistance, pushback for a population which largely believed that we were on the verge of realizing a multiracial democracy in this so-called promised land. So that's why whiteness for me would have to be the word.
And Terry, with that, I think I heard you, sort of second what he said with regards to using whiteness. Could that also be applied to what we've seen happen in 2024 from our U.S. Supreme Court?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. The Supreme Court granting immunity to a man who, to Trump, is really, in a decision granting presidential immunity, was written for Donald Trump. This is a man who is openly racist and openly misogynist. And I think that that's just one of the things that the Supreme Court did. And I think that, and I think Ernie is exactly right. The Supreme Court is driven by the need for some certain types of people to be in charge in this country, to be making decisions in this country. And they are dramatically mostly white and mostly male, right? So we've got, and when I said, no one is coming to save us, that's very specifically about the federal court. The Supreme Court is a MAGA court determined to, sorry?
Terry, we can barely hear you. There's some real interference in the background. Everybody who's not speaking, silence your lines right now. There we go. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that the current Supreme Court, which is it's a 6-3 MAGA Supreme Court, it's not just conservative, and their determination is to put white men back in power in positions to make decisions for everyone who is not a wealthy white male. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you could still say to yourself, well, this is a stupid state law, but the federal courts will never allow it to stand. 15 years ago, you could look at Tennessee's, for example, ridiculous racial gerrymandering of congressional districts and say, the federal courts will never stand for this. Oh, but they did. Because the MAGA Supreme Court is determined that if the white guys in Tennessee want to take power and push through policies in the teeth of strong public opposition, they take the power anyway, they put it through, and the federal courts are not going to save us. So, yes, and when I say save us, I mean save us from white patriarchal capitalism. I think also more and more people are beginning to understand that capitalism is in this country, the way we do capitalism is completely not compatible with democracy. I don't think a lot of politicians understand that yet, but more and more people that I just talked to understand it.
Well, thank you. And Terry, you said some powerful things. A lot of powerful things. I want to point out to people that in preparing for this show, we reviewed all 51 of our other shows we've done this year. And I noted that a third of our shows were about the Supreme Court and about its misbehaviors, everything from Alito's flag, running, a MAGA flag up his, having a MAGA flag flying outside of his home, to Clarence Thomas's taking, over $4 million and allegedly concealing it and not disclosing it. Everything to their bad decisions in the Grants Pass case, saying that homelessness could be criminalized instead of people being helped, and we're cities and we're quite capable of doing it. Just looking at the Alexander case on voting rights, where they got it all backwards and really made it easier for people to racially gerrymander. To just looking at the immunity decision that Daryl has brilliantly dissected over and over again during the year. Once they made that decision in June, just talking about this runaway Supreme Court and this bad federal courts, period, that whole Fearless Fund decision by the 11th Circuit. We have been blessed to have had, Judge Alexander Williams to join us and to help us dissect what's been going on in the federal courts. But this is so important that you raise that up, because they're the ones who struck down some of these gun control laws that people were trying to implement to, stop, the widespread, all these school shootings that we covered during the year. It's just, amazing how important the judiciary is, but also just the vote. But let us get back, to Louis, Elisa, Louis. These natural disasters had a huge impact on our country this year. It seems, are we correct that climate change really is accelerating? And what's going on? The U.S., was present around climate change. Some of the work that Biden's done, and we know that that's all been denounced by MAGA, denounced by the incoming president. What do we need to know about climate change? Buttigieg could have done something and should before he. Something should be done by this administration, by the Biden administration, before it ends, to help the people in Alabama. Come on now. What should we know, Louis, about natural disasters? What did they mean in 2024? Louis?
Mississippi or Flint, Michigan, or any of the other places where the continuing situation about air and water pollution, the quality of life that we have to live in this nation has been deteriorating on a consistent basis. I mean, the only thing I can say is that we need to take a look at how we are doing this. We need to take a look at why we are doing this, because what we're getting out of this situation, we're getting a nation that is less healthy, more challenges than they've ever had before, and they're only going to grow. The amount of impact in the natural environment of the pollutants that are going into the air are not going to get any better from an administration that doesn't believe that there is a problem. And so if they don't maintain the regulations and rules that have been put in place, and they seek to, in a sense, dissipate more, take away more from this, then you're going to get more storms. You're going to see more hurricanes and tornadoes. You're going to see more fires and floods. I mean, the things that I said earlier, these are not 100-year events where you have some flooding like Mississippi used to do back in the late 70s and early 80s. You're going to see events of 500-year catastrophe level, so that you have situations like North Carolina, where you have a storm that's on the coastline actually switch and come inland. and then they start having impacts that, you've never seen before. You get tornadoes, maybe 15, 20 tornadoes touching down at the same time. This has a lot to do with the environment, the warming of the ozone layer being challenged further, the melting of the polar ice caps. All of these are tied in. I'm not sure how we tell Mr. Kennedy and the other environmentalists who will come in to talk about the changes they want to see that this has an impact. I work with the Black Emergency Managers Association, and we're here and all over the world. We're looking at where these trends are going. Every place you go in the world, you have these challenges. You have the challenges in Europe, you have them in Italy and Greece, and people are saying, what's going on? Well, what's going on when you get snow in South Africa, you have a challenge.
Wow.
And Makayla, as we're talking about these issues of what's happening throughout 2024, one of the things that I find really striking that a lot of folks sort of gloss over are our Gen Zs and our young voters.
Yeah.
When I think back to 2024 and young voters, one of the things that sticks in my mind, and because I like to bash the Supreme Court whenever they mess up, but it's with the student loan, right? With the student loan program, the forgiveness program for student loans, how the Biden administration put it in place, and the Supreme Court struck it down and saying that they can't do it. Is that one of the flagships, one of the things that we should really focus on from 2024 for the young voters, Makayla? And are there other issues?
Absolutely. And now that was one of the most significant.
Did I leave off TikTok? I'm sorry. TikTok too. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, TikTok too, right? I feel like we can't be like one track minded. All of these things definitely tie together. And with the presidential election being one of the most significant developments of this year, right? What stood out the most was the youth vote. And Gen Z and millennials showed up in record numbers, proving that, we're not just the future, we are the now. And we care now about things like climate change. And we care now about things like gun violence and even like access to free speech and gaining information through, things like TikTok. That was one of the most pivotal things this year. But of course, it gets overshadowed with all the bigotry and all the hate that has been fueling, and the whiteness, right? We talked about the whiteness that has been fueling this year. And I mean, we can't forget about that. It's super important. And of course, me being a young person and being in my early 20s, I have to give my generation a pat on the back, because I know we've worked so hard this year to allow America and the world recognize that we're not just going to sit back and be ignored. We're going to fight for issues that matter to us, and racial justice and reproductive rights, and access to America is important to us. So.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Daryl.
I'm sorry, Barbara. I just wanted to piggyback on what Makayla was just saying. And that is, and Barbara, you can back this up because you actually have the information in terms of where monies were going in terms of the Democratic Party. But one of the things that I was reading was that those platforms that Makayla is talking about, those young youth, Gen Z, and other platforms, they were not extended the monies and the ability to raise the voter awareness things through those particular programs. The Democratic Party did not do the best job that they could have done in terms of using those particular vehicles.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up, because one of the worst tragedies in 2024 was the lack of funding to African American organizations to get out there and do this work. Biden got 81.2 million votes in 2020. Harris got 75 million votes in essence. That delta between 81 and 75 tells you where the work could have been better done. And the failure to invest because people were being told that black folks were just going to naturally show up and vote. That nonsense.